They took the house on Congress Street. They took the Tahoe. They took his daughter, and they did it on paper, in quiet rooms, with men in good suits. 10 weeks later, a copy of Forbes lay on a conference table in Ann Arbor, and the woman across from him looked from the face on the cover to the man in the grease-stained coveralls and understood they were the same. Eli Brandt did not smile. He had not come to win. They had taken everything a document could hold. No one had ever asked him who he actually was. $200. Eli counted it twice on the counter of a kitchen that was no longer his, because counting it once had not made it more. The papers were already signed. The house on Congress Street, with the porch he had rebuilt by hand and the maple June had been measured against on every birthday, belonged to Vanessa now. The Tahoe belonged to Vanessa. The court had granted her primary custody of their daughter and left him with supervised visitation, 2 afternoons a week. The word supervised sitting in the order like a stone in a shoe. He did not argue. There was no one left in the room to argue with. What Vanessa did not take was the garage. She had walked past it for years the way she walked past it now, and she called the thing in the corner what she had always called it. Junk, his father's steel toolbox, the red paint worn to bare metal at the handles, a grease-stained notebook held shut with a rubber band. A crate of parts, she said, belonged at the dump. Take your scrap, she told him. So he did. He carried the toolbox out with both arms, the way a man carries something heavier than its weight, because it had been Walt Brandt's, and Walt had been gone 4 years, and the box still smelled faintly of his hands. Dolan and Sons Auto on Michigan Avenue had been dark for 3 years, the sign half lit, a chain through the gate. Hank Dolan was past 70 and kept the keys out of habit. He looked at Eli a long moment through the office glass before he came out. Your daddy rebuilt my lathe in '89, Hank said. Wouldn't take a dime. Said a tool that can't work is just a story about work. He spat to the side. $200 a month for the back bay. You sweep your own floor. Eli moved in that night. He slept on a cot beside a dead engine and woke to the smell of cold concrete and oil. On Saturday, June came for her first visit, walking up holding a folded sheet of paper. She was 8, and she had drawn the garage in crayon, the roll door and the one window, and she had written across the top in careful letters, Daddy's new house. Eli taped it to the cabinet door above the toolbox and stood looking at it longer than he meant to. The woman from the county came on a Thursday. She introduced herself as Maren Vesper, the custody evaluator assigned by the Washtenaw County Court, and she said it the way a person reads a form. She had a clipboard and a list. She measured the distance from the cot to the nearest exit. She asked where the child would sleep, where she would eat, whether there was heat. There will be a bed by next week, Eli said. She wrote that down without looking up. And income? I'll have it. She wrote that down too. She had no reason yet to doubt the file, and Eli gave her none. He answered what she asked and nothing more, and when she left, he went back to the engine, and the door rolled closed on its slow chain behind her. She came back on the following Thursday, 20 minutes early, and found the roll door up and June there, perched on an overturned bucket while her father showed her how a cooling fan turned. The bay was warmer than it had been. Someone had run a salvaged space heater off a fresh outlet, and there was a child's quilt folded on the cot, and a second cot beside it now, narrow and made up with care. Maren set her bag down and began the walkthrough she was paid to do, the outlets, the exits, the smoke detector that had not been there last week and was there now. At the workbench, she lifted June's drawing to look behind it, the way she had learned to look behind everything, and under it lay the notebook with the rubber band, and under that a single sheet in a clear plastic sleeve. A United States patent grant. She read the line at the top twice before it arranged itself into meaning. Inventor, Eli Brandt. There were more beneath it, a small squared stack, the language dense and exact, dated across a span of years. Energy storage, thermal management, a solid-state module architecture she did not understand, and did not need to understand to know what it was. It was the kind of paper that did not belong anywhere near the file she had been handed, the file that called this man unemployed, the file that called him a garage tinkerer. The story she had been reading for 3 weeks began, very quietly, to come apart in her hands. She did not say so. She turned, and across the bay, Eli had crouched beside June at the open hood, and he had the girl press her ear flat to the warm block. Listen, he said. It's breathing. You hear it pull and let go, pull and let go. It's breathing. June whispered, delighted, and laughed the way only a child laughs at a true thing. He did not look up at Marin. He did not point to the patents on the bench, did not say a word about them, did not reach for the one explanation that would have ended every doubt in her file in a single sentence. He showed his daughter how to find the rhythm of an idling engine with her own ear, the way Walt Brandt had once shown a boy in another garage 30 years gone, his hands doing all the talking his mouth would not. It was the first thing Marin had seen that the file could not account for, and she realized she had stopped writing some time ago. For a while no one filled the silence. Eli did not offer the explanation he owed no one. Marin did not ask for it. She stood and watched a man teach a child to listen, and she let the questions sit unspoken, which was not in her training, and not on her list, and not like her at all. Her phone buzzed against the clipboard. A message from her supervisor, flagged urgent. The Drayton matter is being expedited. Modification hearing moved up at the petitioner's request. Have your recommendation ready early. She read it twice, the way she had read the patent. She did not yet know that 9 days was all that remained before a thing she could not see would close and turn the whole case over. She knew only that someone with weight had reached into a court calendar and dragged it forward, and that men did not do that unless a clock was running somewhere they badly did not want anyone to look. The thing about control done slowly is that no one feels the ground move. They wake one day and the ground is somewhere else, and they are standing on nothing. Eli understood that now, looking back. 12 years earlier, he and Theo Maddox had founded Halden Power Systems in a rented unit off Industrial Highway. 2 engineers and a battery module that no one would fund. Eli held the patents because Eli had drawn them. Then June was born, and Vanessa's work took her traveling 3 weeks a month, and someone had to be home. So he stepped back from the company in March of a year that had felt, at the time, like the year it would fail. His shares stayed locked in a founder's agreement, illiquid, worth nothing anyone could spend. On paper, he became what the court would later call him, nothing. Vanessa had a calendar in her head he never saw. She filed in April, 11 months before the agreement's cliff lifted and the shares could move. She refinanced the house into her name in May. She took the title to the Tahoe in August. She had the temporary custody order by the fall. Every step landed before the one thing that would have changed the math became real. He had thought it was bad luck and bad timing. It was the only timing there had ever been. The town closed around the story she told. The credit union turned down his application for a small business loan in a 4-minute meeting. A man across the desk who would not meet his eyes, a parts supplier he had bought from for a decade, stopped returning his calls. People he had known from June's school looked at him the way you look at a man who has done something, even when they cannot say what. He took the little money he had and spent it on cells and a controller board and a roll of copper bus bar, and he kept the work under a canvas tarp at the back of the bay because a man who lived in a garage and bought battery components looked like exactly the kind of trouble the file already said he was. Vanessa tightened the visits by text. She moved Thursday to a window so narrow it cost him the drive there and back for 40 minutes with his daughter. She wrote that June was tired, that June had homework, that it was simply better this way. Eli read each message standing at the bench, and he did not write back what he wanted to write. He wrote June a letter instead, in pencil, about an engine and a girl who could hear it breathe, and he did not put a single word about her mother in it, not one, though there were many he could have written and meant. Marin came again for what she called an additional check. She stood in the doorway with the clipboard down at her side this time. "What are you going to raise her on?" she asked. It was not the question on the form. It was the question underneath it. Eli wiped his hands on a rag. He did not say a number, did not make a promise, did not reach for the patents that would have answered her in a sentence. He pulled the tarp halfway back instead and let her see the board he was wiring, the cells racked and labeled, the work that had no name yet. "On this," he said, "and on what I know how to do with my hands." She looked at it longer than the visit required, and she left without writing anything down, which was its own kind of note. Theo came after midnight, headlights swinging across the bay. A man in a good coat who looked wrong against the oil and the dark. He had not stood in the same room as Eli in 2 years, and there was a hesitation in him at the door, the way old friends hesitate when too much has happened between them to start small. "It closed," Theo said. "Or it's about to. The Detroit account wants the module. All of it. Licensing, supply, the whole platform. He laughed once without any joy in it. And they want the inventor's name on the announcement. Forbes is running a cover. Reclusive co-founder, the comeback nobody saw coming. That's you, Eli. After everything, that's you. In a garage, with your name on the thing the whole industry has been chasing for a decade. Eli stood very still by the bench. When, 9 days to close, the cover prints the morning the deal goes public. Theo's face changed, the laugh gone out of it. And here's the part I drove an hour in the dark to say to your face instead of over a phone. Until that morning, I can't confirm a word of it. The non-disclosure is airtight. If I verify your stake, the valuation, any piece of it before the announcement, the buyer has the right to walk, and the whole thing dies, and 12 years of both our lives die with it. He spread his hands, empty. I came because you should hear it from a friend. I came because there is nothing else I'm allowed to do. Not yet. Maybe not in time. Eli understood what Theo was telling him, and he understood the thing underneath it, the way he had learned to hear the thing underneath an engine. There was a custody hearing coming, and one sentence from him about what he was actually worth would change how the court saw him in a single afternoon. He could have his daughter back inside a week. All it would cost was the deal Theo had bled 12 years to build, and the friend standing in front of him, and the quiet truth of his work turned into a blade he swung to win. Then we don't say it, Eli said. Theo looked at him for a long moment. You could lose her waiting. You understand that. You could do the honorable thing and lose your kid for it. I could lose her any number of ways, Eli said. That's not one I'd be able to live beside afterward. Marin had come back for a folder she had left on the bench, and she stood at the edge of the gravel lot and saw a man in a good coat leave a garage at 1 in the morning, saw the way the two of them gripped hands at the door, a grip that meant something old and something hard. She saw that there was a story here far larger than the bay it was happening inside. Her instinct, the one 15 years on the job had filed to an edge, told her she was missing something. It also told her she wanted to be missing it, that she wanted this man to be what she was beginning to believe he was, and she stood in the dark and warned herself, the way she had taught herself too, that wanting a thing was the surest way in the world to read a file wrong. She read the file again the next morning, the old part, the original evaluation that had set the whole case in motion, and she read it the way you reread a sentence that has begun, overnight, to sound like a lie. It had been filed in 11 days. Her own evaluations took 6 weeks, because 6 weeks was how long it took to do them honestly. 2 mandatory parent interviews were marked complete with no notes attached to either. The home study had no photographs, when the form required photographs. The collateral contacts, the teacher, the doctor, the neighbor, were listed as not reached, all of them, on the first attempt, and never tried again. It was the work of someone moving fast on purpose, and Marin had been doing this long enough to know that fast on purpose meant someone had wanted it done before anyone careful had the chance to look. She drove to the house on Congress Street and sat with Vanessa at the kitchen table, professional, even, asking the questions she was required to ask in the order she was required to ask them. Vanessa answered them smoothly, the way a practiced host answers questions, until Marin asked why the first evaluation had skipped the interviews and the photographs, and then the smoothness went thin as ice over moving water. I wouldn't know how the county handles its own paperwork, Vanessa said. She set her cup down with great care. Royce knows a great many people who care quite a lot about how this turns out, people with long memories. You might want to keep that in mind before you spend too many of your hours on paperwork that's already been decided. It was said pleasantly, the way a door is closed pleasantly, with a click instead of a slam. Marin wrote none of it in her notes. She did not need to write down a thing she would not forget. June was in the next room, and she drifted to the doorway, shy of the stranger, and then not shy at all the way children stop being shy all at once. Are you the lady who decides where I live? She asked. I'm the lady who helps the judge understand things, Marin said. June weighed this, the seriousness of it. My daddy can fix anything. He fixed a bird once, a real one, with a hurt wing. He made it a little splint out of a popsicle stick and tape, and it flew away after. She dropped her voice to the register of a secret worth keeping. And he never says bad things about my mommy. Even when I ask him to take my side, he just says everybody loves me and that's the part that matters. He says it every time the same. Children do not know which of their sentences are the heavy ones. Maureen carried that one out to the car and sat with both hands on the wheel for a while before she trusted herself to start the engine. At the office that evening, she pulled the original evaluation to scan a clean copy into her own working file, and the system opened the access log along with it, the way it always did and the way no one ever read. She read it now. The record had been opened 11 times in the last month and edited twice, and both edits came from an account that was not hers, not her supervisor's, not the original evaluators, not anyone in the office she could put a name to. Someone was inside the file. Someone had been quietly changing it while she worked the case out in the open, in good faith, like a fool. The woman who came to the garage that Tuesday was nearly 70, with Vanessa's jaw and none of Vanessa's ease. She introduced herself to Marin in the gravel lot, having waited there the better part of an hour, and she held a manila envelope flat against her chest with both hands, the way you hold something that has cost you to carry. "I'm Greta Crane," she said. "Vanessa's mother. You'll want to sit down for this, or you won't, but either way you'll want to read it." Inside was a financial disclosure 3 years old, and a sheaf of printed text messages, and a single sheet of notepaper in a man's blunt hand. The disclosure listed the Halden founder's stake by name, and by a projected value that made Marin go quiet. Vanessa had known what those shares would be worth, and almost to the month when. The messages ran between Vanessa and her mother, back to the spring before the filing. "We close before the cliff lifts," one of them read. "After that it's marital property, and he's a millionaire, and the house is half his. Before that he's a man in a garage and I get all of it. Timing is everything, Mom. You taught me that." The last sheet was the worst of them. Royce Drayton held the development note on the prior evaluator's failing practice. A balloon payment coming due that the man had no way on earth to make, and the note in Royce's hand made plain, in fewer words than it should have taken, exactly what the man would do to keep his lights on. "File it fast. Keep it light on detail. We'll handle the rest from here." "She is my daughter," Greta said, and her voice did not break so much as go flat, the way a road goes flat before a long descent, "and I have watched her hand a good man's child to a man who buys the favor of judges and calls the buying of it winning. I cannot forgive that. I will not sit in a pew beside it on a Sunday and pretend my throat isn't closing." She pressed the envelope into Marin's hands and folded Marin's fingers around it with her own. "Whatever it costs you to use it, use it. It has already cost me the only daughter I have." For 15 years Marin had lived in the careful lane between the parties, neutral, exact, a reader of files and nothing more. She was not neutral now, and she knew it, and the knowing arrived with the plain, quiet certainty of a thing finally seen whole. She knew which side of this she was standing on. She also knew, just as plainly, what standing there might do to a career built entirely on the discipline of never standing anywhere. She drove to the garage to tell Eli, and it was not an official visit, and they both understood that the moment she stepped through the door, he poured 2 cups of coffee that neither of them drank. They sat on 2 stools at the bench while it went cold between them, the steam thinning and then gone, and for a long while no one said a word, and the silence was not empty. It was a line, drawn somewhere neither of them could point to, and the line had begun to move, and neither of them was willing yet to be the one who named it out loud. Royce Drayton did not raise his voice either. That was the family resemblance Greta had not thought to mention. The motion came through the proper channels, the way such things always do, dressed in the proper clothes. A formal request that the evaluator be removed from the matter for conflict of interest, citing her unscheduled visits, her contact with members of the petitioner's family, and what the filing called, in a phrase chosen by someone who was paid well to choose phrases, her evident personal investment in the respondent. It was signed by a firm that did a great deal of comfortable work for Drayton Development. Clipped to the back of it, helpfully, almost as an afterthought, was a single line reminding the county that the evaluator's office ran on a service contract that came up for its renewal in the spring. It was a threat with the manners of a memo. "Step back, or the spring will not be kind to you." It did not need to say more, and so it did not. Eli heard about it because Greta heard about it, and word in a small county moves the way water moves, downhill and into every low place. He stood in the bay with the phone in his hand and understood, with a clean cold weight in his chest, that the woman was being burned because she had stood too close to his fire. He got in the truck and drove to her office and waited in the lot the way her mother had waited in his. Because some debts you pay in the same currency they were lent. "Step back," he said when she came out into the gray afternoon. "Recuse yourself. Tell them whatever they want to hear and let it go. I'll find another way to fight this. I always find another way. I am not going to be the reason they take your work from you. You've given 30 years to it. I won't be the bill that comes due." Marin looked at him for a moment that ran a full beat too long to be only professional. "You've spent this entire case putting other people's roofs up over your own head," she said. "Your friend's deal, your daughter's name kept out of your mouth even when saying it would have won you the whole thing. And now mine." She shook her head, slow and certain. "No, I read files true for a living. This one I am going to read true, and I am going to put my name on the bottom of it, and I am going to let the spring do whatever the spring is going to do." She filed the new recommendation the next morning. It rested on what she had measured with her own 2 eyes, and what she could prove from the access logs, and from the contents of Greta's envelope, and it recommended a full restoration of the father's custodial rights pending the modification hearing. She signed it knowing exactly what it might cost her, and she signed it anyway, and her hand did not shake. That weekend, Eli fixed her bicycle. She had mentioned it once, in passing weeks earlier, a $40 thrift store bike, with a seized chain that she kept meaning to deal with and never did. He had not forgotten. He had it apart on the bench and back together by Sunday afternoon, the chain broken down and cleaned and oiled link by link, the brakes trued, a new bell because the old one had cracked through. He did not tell her he had done it. He left it leaning against the wall by the office door of her building, with a folded note that said only, "It rolls now." She found it Monday morning, and stood with her hand resting on the worn seat for a while before she went inside. The hearing and the deal were going to come down in the same week. Eli could feel both clocks now, ticking toward the same gray morning, and he did not know which of the two would strike the hour first, or what would be left of him standing in the room when it did. Royce made his last move, and it was the move of a man who had only ever learned to think in pressure, who believed every door could be leaned on until it opened. He pushed the hearing forward a second time, harder, spending the kind of favors that pushing a court calendar requires, until it sat on a Wednesday morning 2 weeks early. The aim was plain and it was simple. End the thing before one word about Eli Brandt could reach the public. Close the case while the file still said nothing, while the man was still only a man in a garage with a cot and a tarp. He did not know, because he had never thought to ask the right question about the man he was crushing, that he had just scheduled the hearing for the exact morning the rest of the country would learn who that man was. The night before, Eli was not thinking about Royce, or the calendar, or the file. He was thinking about the board under the tarp, the work finally finished, every cell wired and every connection checked twice, and about June beside him on the overturned bucket in her winter coat, because the bay held the cold at night. "You want to start it?" he asked her. She looked at him the way a child looks at a parent who has just handed her the moon and told her it was hers to keep. He showed her the switch, a small black toggle on the corner of the board, and she set her small thumb on it, and she looked up at him once to be sure, and he nodded, and she pressed it. The controller woke. A strip of indicator lights ran the length of the rack and then held, steady, a clean, unbroken line of green, the first current the thing had ever pulled through itself in the world. It did nothing dramatic. There was no roar, no spark, no show. It simply worked, quietly and completely, which was the only thing Eli Brandt had ever wanted any of it to do, in 12 years of wanting. "You did it, Daddy," June breathed. "We did it," he said, and he held the moment the way he held her drawings to the cabinet, gently, with both hands. Somewhere it would not blow away. Across town a phone rang in the hand of a Forbes editor, and a press somewhere confirmed a run, and the cover with Eli's face on it locked for the morning, no longer changeable by anyone. The anonymous engineer behind Halden's quiet billion-dollar comeback was about to have a name printed on newsstands and lit on screens in every state in the country, 9 days after a deal began to close, and there was no clock left anywhere that Royce Drayton's money could reach. The courtroom in the Washtenaw County building was small and overbright, and the story Royce and Vanessa's lawyer told inside it was the same old story, polished smooth from the telling. Unemployed, unstable, a man who lived in a garage, who could not provide, who had no income the court could verify in a single legitimate document. They had photographs of the bay, of the cot, of the tarp in the corner shot to look like squalor instead of work. They read the original evaluation aloud, slowly, as though it were scripture, and not a thing bought and rushed in 11 days. They were still reading it when the bailiff's phone lit, and then the clerk's, and then a dozen phones in the gallery at once, a soft, scattered chiming that should not have been happening in a courtroom and could not be stopped. The deal had gone public at the top of the hour. Halden Power Systems, acquired in a landmark licensing agreement, the figure attached to it large enough to bend the room, and on the cover that ran with the news, the reclusive co-founder, the man who held the patents, photographed in grease-stained coveralls in the back bay of a shuttered garage in Ypsilanti, Michigan. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Greta Crane walked the full length of the aisle and took the stand. And she did not look at her daughter, not once, the whole way up. She entered the messages and the disclosure and the note in Royce's blunt hand, and she said under oath, in a voice that flattened every other sound in the room, what her daughter had known and exactly when she had known it, and what Royce had bought and from whom. Theo Maddox followed her, the non-disclosure lifted at 9 o'clock that very morning, and confirmed under oath what Eli Brandt was, and had always quietly been. Vanessa was not looking at any of it. She was looking at the copy of the magazine someone had set on the table between the parties, at the toolbox in the photograph behind her former husband's shoulder, the red one with the worn handles, the one she had called scrap, and at the notebook beside it she had told him to carry to the dump. She understood, all at once and far too late to do her any good, that the thing she had thrown out of the house was the very thing that had built everything she had spent 14 careful months taking. She saw it now, whole and plain. The seeing changed nothing at all. Eli did not stand to gloat. When the judge asked whether he had anything he wished to say, he stood, and he said one thing. "I never wanted the house," he said. "I never wanted the car. They could have kept all of it, every board and every bolt. I wanted my daughter. That is the only thing I came to this building for. The only thing I have wanted the whole time." Nothing on that cover changes a word of it. The court restored joint custody, full and equal and effective that day, and ordered a review of the original evaluation that every soul in the room understood would end careers before the spring. Across the aisle, Royce Drayton's influence was already running out of him in real time, his phone gone dark in his hand, his lawyer leaning to whisper something he had no answer for. With the case closed, the wall that had stood between Eli and the woman who had been assigned to judge him simply was not there anymore. He looked across the courtroom and found Marin already looking back at him, and neither of them said a word, and the look held a moment longer than any look between two strangers ever holds, and that was all of it, and it was all it needed to be. Royce Drayton lost the riverfront development before the month was out. The county did not punish him. Not exactly. Not in any way you could point to. The partners on the project, simply read the court record, saw a man who had bought a custody evaluation the way other men buy a sandwich, and one by one stopped returning his calls until there were no calls left to return. Vanessa kept the house on Congress Street and moved through its rooms understanding, finally and completely, what she had failed to value while it sat on her own shelf, which is a far heavier thing to carry through a life than a small apartment ever was. Eli kept the garage. He did not need it now. He could have bought the building, the block, the street the block sat on. He kept it because Walt Brandt's son was a man who worked with his hands. And a man does not stop being that because a magazine has printed his face on a cover. He hired Hank Dolan back to run the front counter and told him the rent was zero now and the wage was real. And it came out, the way these things come out, that Eli had quietly put a trust in June's name a full year before any of the trouble started. Money set aside from the founder's agreement on the very day she was born so that whatever in the world happened to him, his daughter would never once be reduced to a line in a file that said she came from nothing. June taped a new drawing to the cabinet door, over the curled seam where the old one had been. 3 figures this time, in crayon, careful. Her father with a wrench in his hand, herself in the middle where she belonged, and a woman off to the side, drawn a little smaller, holding a folder of papers, drawn with the kind of care a child gives to the people she has decided to keep. On the bench below it, the old notebook lay open, the rubber band off at last, and in the margin of a page Walt Brandt had filled years before, in pencil gone soft and gray, were 4 words. "You can't sell what's worth keeping." Marin came by on a Saturday, not for the county, with no clipboard and no list in her hands. The bicycle stood outside on its kickstand, the new bell catching the light. Eli handed her a cup of coffee, and this time it was hot, and she wrapped both her hands around it and held it close. "June's inside," he said. She wants to show you the engine. Says you never got the full demonstration last time. I didn't, Marin said. Neither of them said the larger thing. There was no longer any need to. They stood in the open mouth of the bay with the cold morning at their backs and the warm light of the shop ahead of them, and the silence between them was the comfortable kind now, the kind that does not ask to be filled, and that was the whole of it. They took the house. They took the car. They took his daughter, for a while, with paper and good suits, and a man who could be bought by the foot. But the thing that mattered the most had never once been written on any document, which is precisely the reason no one had ever been able to take it. It had been in his hands the entire time, and in a red toolbox, and in a girl who could press her ear to an engine and hear it breathe. He had only ever been waiting for the right person to look past the file and see it. Here is the question, and it is one that is going to split the room. If someone spent a year taking everything you had, and then stood by and watched you rebuild all of it from $200 and a box they had called scrap, would you ever let them back into your life, or would you let them sit alone with what they built? Tell me below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. This story is a work of fiction. The names, the characters, the places, and the events are entirely imagined, and no real person is depicted or referenced. The emotions inside it, and the legal realities beneath it, are not invented. Coercive control inside a marriage, the quiet restructuring of assets before a divorce, and custody fought on the narrow ground of who looks stable on paper happen in courtrooms in every state, every single year, to people who never saw it coming. If you or someone you love is facing a divorce or a custody dispute, please speak with a family law attorney about your rights to marital property and to your children. Free legal information is available through resources such as womanslaw.org. Knowing what is yours is not optional. It is how you keep it.